Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Double Waved Yellows podcast. Happy New Year, everybody. It's 2022, which means we're going to have a look back at the 2021 season. And as always, Hodders and Tyson join me in our virtual studio. How you both doing, guys?
Hey up, Happy New Year.
Hey up as well. Good to see you. Good to be back.
It seems hard to think that the season finished about 4 weeks ago and we're already into 2022. Crazy. Right, so we're also going to go through the season bit by bit, analysing each of the 22 races. What our memories were, what our best bits, what our worst bits was, and all such. So also our expectations. This time last year, what we were thinking. Hodders, we were clearly thinking that this was going to be a usual championship battle with Lewis leading the fight, but Max appeared to have closed the gap in pre-season testing.
Absolutely, those gaps were closer than they'd ever been, and it made us think maybe there's an actual title fight on our hands rather than it being a Mercedes dominance.
And of course, that's something that we have been longing to see since the beginning of the turbo hybrid era in 2014. Obviously, several new drivers in Yuki Tsunoda, Mick Schumacher, the Schumacher name back on the grid, and the Russian Nikita Mazepin. A driver returning to the Formula One grid, Tyson Fernando Alonso, and we seem a bit perplexed by all this.
Yeah, because we were wondering, why has Alonso come back? Is it for the right reasons? And, being one of the older drivers, does he still have it? But he certainly proved us wrong over the season.
And of course, again, COVID-19 did affect the season with 5 of the races being cancelled due to COVID. The Vietnamese Grand Prix was completely axed due to the arrest of a key official. Portugal and Syria were back on the calendar, and we travelled back to the Netherlands for the first time since the 1980s, and also Qatar and Saudi Arabia were added to the calendar. So 22 races. We're going to dive into the first 6 to start with. So opening round in Bahrain, Hamilton leading home Verstappen and Bottas. Verstappen passing Hamilton quite late on. And this was something, Hodders, that we discussed at length in our VSC podcast. Track limits. Verstappen would have had this race won had he obeyed the track limits.
He had, and it was a sign of things to come across the season for all drivers, really, that those track limits were going to be enforced, and if you go off, you're in trouble.
Absolutely. Perez, a really good fight back for him, winning the Driver of the Day award from the fans. He finished 5th, starting from the pit lane after he coasted to a halt on the first formation lap. Managed to get it to the car restarted back to the pits and off again. And Tyson, a driver who we've warmed to throughout the season, Yuki Tsunoda, scoring points on debut.
Yeah, this was a really good race to start off with for Yuki. He showed a lot of promise, a lot of fire, and that's exactly what we wanted to see from the rookie.
Absolutely, but at the other end of the spectrum, a considerably experienced driver in Sebastian Vettel receiving penalties in both qualifying and the race in an absolutely awful debut for Aston Martin. Moving on to the next race then at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix at the Imola circuit, and it was pretty much role reversed as Verstappen led home in a rain-strewn Grand Prix from Hamilton, and Lando Norris also on the podium, which was superb. But the key moment midway through the race, a huge crash between Bottas and Russell, current Mercedes and future Mercedes drivers, causing the race to be suspended. Tyson, this was lucky because about a lap before, Hamilton had actually went off at the hairpin and dropped more than a lap down. Had it not been for this red flag, he'd have really been struggling to score points.
Yeah, it was very fortunate for Hamilton, that was.
Yeah, but a good recovery drivers. We consistently mention here on the podcast, but it all counts. Hodders, a great performance from McLaren for Norris, who got the driver of the day in 3rd, and Ricciardo in 6th.
Absolutely. I mean, considering that McLaren had been up and down in previous seasons, it was good to see McLaren back where they belong, competing for those, not only the podium place, but the higher ranks of points as well. It was a great performance from those in orange.
Yep, definitely. So McLaren starting to lead the Formula 1.5 battle ahead of Ferrari at that point. The third race of the season at Portugal at the Portimao circuit, and Hamilton maintaining his championship lead ahead of Verstappen and Bottas for the second race out of three. Perez getting driver of the day. Good performance from the Mexican, and a great showing, Hodders, from the Alpine team. 7th for Ocon and 8th for Alonso.
Yes, it was around this time that probably later in the season, that I really started warming to Alpine in general, as they seem to just absolutely find their métier in Portugal, and it seemed to continue throughout the season as well.
Mm-hmm. But as we've already procrued to, Verstappen losing points again due to track limits. He set the fastest lap on the final lap of the race. Unfortunately, he's gone off the track and he has that fastest lap point taken away, and it gets given to Bottas. So, moving to Spain again, staying in the European races, Hamilton again coming home from Verstappen and Bottas. Hamilton taking his 100th career pole position, the same as 5 constructors who had also all taken 100 poles, but Hamilton done 100 all on his own. And Tyson, a superb strategy from Hamilton, making the extra stop, but he made it count, passing Verstappen with 7 laps to go.
Yeah, this was Mercedes at their finest. They got the strategy right that day. Red Bull didn't.
Mm-hmm. And Hamilton getting the driver of the day out of that one. Next, on to F1's jewel in the crown, the Monaco Grand Prix. And this was a key moment for all of us. Leclerc setting pole position in qualifying before promptly crashing. We thought, is the car going to be all right? Is the gearbox going to be all right? It appears the car was okay. But on his installation up on the way to the grid, we heard the cries of no, 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 as his gearbox packed up and he was unable to start. Hodders, this was horrible because it was a brilliant pole lap.
It was a fantastic pole lap, and it wasn't just horrible. I think the term being with H is heartbreaking, and that's what it was. To get pole on your home Grand Prix, to crash, try the installation, and then everything just falling to bits was a real kick in the teeth, because I think Leclerc might well have won that one, considering it was Monaco.
Absolutely, considering it was Monaco. And Verstappen took full advantage of that, leading home. Sainz in the other Ferrari, so a bit of damage limitation there. And Lando Norris on the podium again. Vettel getting driver of the day for his superb performance there, but an awful performance from Mercedes. Tyson, Hamilton's 7th, and Bottas, those sticky wheel nuts really being a problem.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to Mercedes that race. They just had a shocker of a weekend.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it meant they relinquished the championship lead in both the drivers and the constructors' battle. Bottas, I think this is an unofficial one, but he now holds the record for the longest pit stop. In that they. When Bottas came in for his pit stop, they literally could not remove the right front wheel, and they actually couldn't get it removed until they got the car back to Brackley on the Tuesday. 43 hours and 15 minutes. We shouldn't laugh, but it was. Oh dear, yeah. Not great. And then round 6, Baku, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and what a cracking race, but it did have a fair bit of drama and controversy. Sergio Perez winning for the first time for Red Bull, followed home by Vettel and Norris. Leclerc setting the pole position time and leading the way really well, but he dropped down the order. but two massive tyre blowouts on the start-finish straights. Firstly, Stroll going into the wall at high speed, bringing out a safety car midway through, and then 12 laps later, just 5 laps from home, Verstappen, who had been leading pretty much all race, his tyre blows on the start-finish straight, bringing out the red flag. Hodders, these were big crashes and rather worrying that it appears to be again Pirelli are having tyre faults.
Absolutely. I remember us watching the race live and we were thinking, what on earth is going on? Not just have one load of tyre blowouts, but two, where what was even more unusual was the fact that the weather conditions weren't inclement, the track was in good condition. It made you wonder what on earth was going on with the tyres, and Pirelli did some very long investigations and couldn't, in the end, find much wrong with them, which was bizarre.
Mm-hmm. But of course, with the red flag, it meant Hamilton had a golden opportunity to bring home at 25 points with the race restarted with just 2 laps remaining. But bizarrely, he accidentally flicked on his brake magic button going into the first corner, and he dropped from first all the way down to last. Tyson, unfortunate, but Hamilton could well look back at this one and think, what if?
Yeah, this was the first of what would be many races where you'd look back on it and think, well, what if that race was different? It really picked up for the championship fight here. Golden opportunity for Lewis and Max as well, and just both of them threw it away.
Yeah, I mean, Max, you've got to say, he was unfortunate. You know, it
Yeah.
wasn't a fault of neither himself nor the team. It was just one of those circumstances beyond their control. As for Lewis, yeah, not good, but obviously, just a poor performance. So after 6 rounds, Max Verstappen led the championship on 105 points. Hamilton 4 points behind on 101. Sergio leading best of the rest on 69 points, Lando on 66 points, Charles Leclerc 52, Bottas on 47, Sainz on 42, Gasly 31, Vettel 20, and Ricciardo on 26, rounding out the top 10. In the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull led on 174 points from Mercedes on 148. A very close battle for third and fourth. Ferrari leading on 94 with McLaren on 92. And again, a really tight battle there in the midfield as well. AlphaTauri on 39, Aston Martin on 37, Alpine on 25, Alfa Romeo on 2, and Haas and Williams yet to score. So moving into the second part of the season, and we went to the picturesque French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard and Verstappen having an absolutely dominant performance, leading home from Hamilton and Perez. Verstappen is also setting the pole and gaining the fast lap, and understandably so, getting the Driver of the Day award. And Hodders this time, Red Bull using the extra stop strategy that Mercedes seemed to have got work quite well. Verstappen passing Hamilton with 2 laps to go.
Absolutely, and it seemed to be something that had been developing during the season. Of sometimes races were being won not just on the racing, but also on the pit strategy as well. Whether it be one team getting it right or the other getting it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Or a combination of both.
Yes.
And Tyson, yeah, we often said that the French Grand Prix was boring, very pedestrian, sort of similar to Monaco, but the French Grand Prix actually had quite a bit of overtaking involved, which is great to see.
Yeah, in all fairness, it was a really exciting race, which was a pleasant surprise in all honesty. As you said, fights all over the track.
Yep, and that's what we want to see. So, moving on to the first of a doubleheader at the Red Bull Ring, the Styrian Grand Prix, first of all, and of course, one or two Max Verstappen fans turning out to cheer on him and, of course, the Red Bull team. And Verstappen delivering, coming home from Hamilton and Bottas leading from pole. Hamilton did get the fastest lap, but Leclerc getting Driver of the Day after a superb performance from the Monegasque driver. Verstappen leading every lap to come home. Hodders, this was a dominant performance by Max.
It absolutely was. I mean, Max didn't put a foot wrong throughout the whole race on what we thought was a brilliant race, and I thought both races at the Red Bull Ring were fantastic because they were fast, furious, and to the point. And again, to lead every lap is an achievement in and of itself, more so on a sprint circuit such as the Red Bull Ring.
Mm-hmm. And then a week later for the Austrian Grand Prix, Verstappen kind of went one better by doing the Grand Chelem for his 50th podium. Verstappen winning from Bottas and Norris. Hamilton having a really poor showing. Driver of the day going to Lando Norris. Again, Lando on the podium. And it was his first ever front row start. Tyson Norris is very quickly at this point starting to become a real contender here for the sort of the Formula 1.5 winner as we refer to it.
Yeah, for the first half of the season, Lando was definitely the driver to watch. He was up there at the front. He was putting in the results.
Yep, and not only was Norris was becoming Mr. Sunday, but equally we were keeping an eye on Mr. Saturday, George Russell, finally getting that Williams into qualifying 3. Hodders, Russell was pushing that Williams so much throughout the season, and he got his just rewards, or the first of his just rewards in Austria.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it was safe to say that at the beginning of the season, if anyone had suggested that George Russell would be getting into Q3 quite frequently with that Williams car, I think many people would have either laughed in disbelief or thought, what on earth are you currently consuming? But at the same time, it goes to show the sort of pedigree that George Russell has in terms of pure driving skill. The fact that he can excel a car that, with all respect, doesn't really have the pedigree or the speed or performance rate to get into Q3, and he got it there.
Yeah, absolutely. But as much as Russell was our winner of the weekend, Perez got one of our spinner of the weekend, giving 2 penalties for shoving Charles Leclerc off the track, not once, but twice. And although we thought the penalties at the time were rather harsh, I think at least the stewards were consistent with that. So, moving on to round 10, the British Grand Prix, and a debut of a new feature in Formula 1, the sprint race or qualifying or events. I think sprint event is what F1 are officially calling it. So, qualifying happened on the Friday. That sets the grid for a sprint race on the Saturday. The top 3 scoring points out of that, and then that sets the grid for the Grand Prix on Sunday. Hodders, something new, and the teams had to think very differently with their strategies.
They absolutely do, not just considering just in general how the cars were handling, but also tyre management, considering how the way that tyres worked throughout the weekend. Not to mention they had 1 fewer practice, so it was just a case of having the 2 practices, then qualifying, then the sprint, and then the race. And I actually welcome that change because it really caused the teams to think hard and long.
Mm-hmm. And it's Tyson, it's something different for the drivers because, as the title suggests, they can just sprint. They can just go for it. They don't have to worry about conservation of tyres or anything. It was literally, it should be the fastest driver on the track wins. No help from the pits, etc.
Yeah, it was something different, and I think Silverstone was the perfect place to showcase it for the first time out.
Yeah, but it was good to showcase that. But what we saw on Sunday was considerably more dramatic as Verstappen and Hamilton battled side by side all through the first half lap until they reached Copse turn 9. Hamilton collided with Verstappen being pitched into the barriers very, very hard, causing the race to be suspended. Hamilton getting a 10-second time penalty. Leclerc took the lead, but Hamilton managed to get past Leclerc towards the end to take the win from Leclerc and teammate Bottas. Perez, quite smart thinking from Red Bull. Although Perez was a long way back, they pitted him so that he could take the fastest lap point off of Lewis Hamilton. Hodders, it was this point that the championship battle pretty much boiled over in terms of the war of words between the drivers and even more so the team principals, Toto Wolff and Christian Horner.
Yeah, it seemed to me at that point, it seemed like in the building up from the previous rounds, it very much felt like a pressure cooker had been building by that point, in that we had a situation where there'd been all the tension, the back and forth arguments, general annoyances throughout the season, and I felt like the pressure. I think the stopcocks came off, and the pressure, the steam just let out, and it came to a 4. And there we had it on the first lap, where things went up another level, and it wasn't pleasant.
It wasn't pleasant, and something that started to come to the fore this season, but we have very much heard a lot of throughout the British Grand Prix. Tyson, was the introduction of the race director radio feed.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to hear this because it's not something you generally get on the television feed, hearing the team principals and other engineers talking to the race director himself.
Mm-hmm. And I think, for the British Grand Prix, I think Michael Massey dealt with the inquiries from both Mercedes and Red Bull quite well, which was good to see and hear. And then moving on to the final race before the summer break, the Hungarian Grand Prix, and another highly dramatic first lap. The race started in sort of intermediate damp conditions. And unfortunately, the first corner was so wet that we saw Bottas, Perez, Leclerc, Stroll, and Norris all wiped out at the first corner. Verstappen also heavily damaged after both Bottas and Leclerc causing 2 separate pile-ups. The race had to be stopped because of debris all over the track. And by the time the race restarted, Tyson, it was very much a choice of inters or dries.
Yeah, and that gave us the really comical visual of only one person lining up on the starting grid at the restart.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all remember the comical image of 6 cars lining up in Indianapolis all those years ago. But just seeing the only 2 Mercedes we had on the grid was Lewis Hamilton and Alan van der Merwe in the medical car. Everyone else on the restart lap, the safety car restart lap, had decided no, not intermediates, it's dries. Everyone came in, rightly so, and yeah, you just saw the bizarre image of Hamilton taking off down the grid, and then 14 other drivers following behind him, all on dries, and quite clear it was a comical sight, but it was an equally comical call from Mercedes, because Hodders, Mercedes must have seen all the mechanics coming out in the pit lane with dry tyres. Why on earth they didn't pull Hamilton in? It's just crazy.
It felt like one of the biggest hints that you might want to come in that I've ever seen. And I think I actually recall laughing at the time of, hang on a minute, what's going on here? And of course, as you'll probably allude to in a minute, it all came to a 4 shortly after.
Yeah, it wasn't good. And yeah, Hamilton, obviously he lost so much time on the intermediates. By the time he pitted, he came back out in last place. So that set up for an absolutely wacky result. And Esteban Ocon claiming his first win for himself and for Alpine. Hamilton spectacularly managing to recover up to third behind Vettel, who was second, but subsequently disqualified for not providing enough fuel for the fuel sample at the end. Sainz actually taking the final podium space. Driver of the Day award going to Fernando Alonso, because Alonso's performance at that race was A, fantastic, and B, meant we all had to eat a rather large slice of humble pie.
Yep, this was the race where we saw Alonso's back, and he can still race with the best of them.
Absolutely, he can. It was just incredible. And it set it up quite nicely going into the summer break. And also, Latifi and Russell bringing home a huge haul of points for Williams, which meant at the halfway point, Lewis Hamilton led the championship on 195 points from Verstappen on 187. So just 8 points separating the two. Lando Norris leading best of the rest on 113, Bottas on 108, Sergio Perez on 104. And then the 2 Ferrari drivers, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, fairly close on 83 and 80 points respectively. Gasly and Ricciardo, 50 points each, and that superb debut win for Ocon put him into the top 10 on 39 points. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes led the way on 303 from Red Bull on 291. Ferrari and McLaren tied on points on 163 points each. Sainz's second place in Monaco, breaking the tie there. Alpine with a huge 37-point haul puts them up to fifth on 77. AlphaTauri on 68. Again, AlphaTauri bringing home a good haul of points as well. Aston Martin dropping back on 48. Williams, their first point of the season at Budapest, meant they have 10 points. Alfa Romeo on 3 and Haas yet to score. So at the halfway point, guys, we were really thinking that this was going to be a superb title fight between Hamilton and Verstappen, between Mercedes and Red Bull. But what was quite clear is that in the space of a week, Red Bull's phenomenal lead that they had built up in both the drivers and the Constructors' Championship had been quite literally wiped away. Hodders, we were all rubbing our hands looking forward for Belgium, weren't we?
We really were. It couldn't have come soon enough. It was just a case of, we have a battle here. This is actually going to go close. And I think I remember saying at the time, I thought it was going to go close at the end.
Mm-hmm. But Tyson, what was starting to become really unpleasant is there was a lot of focus on what was being said off the track, and we were hoping that things were going to calm down during the summer break.
Yeah, you could just sense before Great Britain this had been simmering underneath the surface. Once that crash happened, everything just started to blow up at this point. It did get unpleasant at times.
And it did almost get personal as well, which wasn't pleasant. Anyway, moving into the second half, and of course, a great way to come back from the summer break was a nice Spa weekend. No, not the one at a country house, the one at the Spa-Francorchamps circuit in Belgium, and we kind of got a taste of what was to come when we were all watching the W Series qualifying session, and there was that big accident at the top of the Radillon chicane. Hodders, that was not pleasant to watch, and that's one thing I actually remember quite distinctively from this season.
I still remember it quite well. I think it was the point, I'm not sure if you're the same, but I think after that qualifying session, I think I went for quite a long walk just to clear my head. I was actually quite shaken up by it.
Absolutely. And as you said, it was a sign of things to come, as we then had a wet qualifying session on the Saturday for Formula One. And it threw up quite a result. We thought Norris could have been on pole, but he's absolutely smashed it into the wall in Q3. I mean, he starts P10. George Russell, it looked like he was going to be on pole until Verstappen spoilt the party. So it was Verstappen and Russell on the front row. But unfortunately, we never really got any sort of green flag racing, as the race ended up being abandoned after just 2 laps. The start was delayed for over 3 hours due to torrential rain, several delayed starts, and then eventually we got going behind the safety car. But on lap 3, the red flag was shown and a result declared. It seems weird, Tyson, to call this a race, but in terms of the rules and when history looks back on this, it was a quote-unquote race.
Yeah, a race that was more like a farce, to be honest. They gave the race every opportunity they could to get started, but knowing how the rain was going to come down, it was never going to happen. It was just a bad look for Formula One in general that weekend.
Yeah, and I think what also didn't help is that basically, because of the nature of the track, although the rain eased off at some points, there was just no wind to sort of blow it away. And of course, the cars weren't circulating to clear some of the water. And then Tyson, when they did get going, even Verstappen was struggling to see behind the safety car.
Yeah, just the amount of spray that was being kicked up. Just undrivable conditions.
Yeah, completely undrivable. And Hodders, Tyson alluded to it there in that it was farcical, but I guess Michael Massey, the race director, he was caught between a rock and a hard place. If he didn't get it going, we effectively would have had no race. If he'd have let the cars go racing, we could have had 20 cars piling into each other.
It really was a case of he was damned if he did and damned if he didn't. And I did sympathise with him at that point. I mean, I would say farcical race and race. I think when you say race with inverted commas, you're not just using your own hand; you're using those big foam things you get at American big sporting events. Metaphorically speaking, if you can bend such things, that's how big of an inverted commas race it was. It wasn't a race, and let's face it. To me, and I think we discussed at the time whether they needed to change what constituted a race or not, didn't we?
Yes, we did. We are, and they haven't finalised the 2022 regulations yet. We are expecting those to be released soon, and of course, any changes we will cover when we do our season preview next month. For what it's worth, say Verstappen wins from Russell, his first podium of his career, and Lewis Hamilton third, but half points were awarded. As I said, Norris did crash in qualifying 3. He would have probably thought, Hodders, had he not crashed, he could have been on for a great haul of points, possibly even his first win.
Absolutely. I mean, I know it's not always helpful to indulge in the science that is what-ifery, if you want to call it that. But again, Lando had such a chance to get points there. He'll feel quite I think he'll feel himself quite unlucky with what happened in Q3. Although, let's face it, I think even then he would have had the points from that quote-unquote race, wouldn't he?
Well, to quote the late great Murray Walker, who we lost last year, if is F1 spelled backwards, of course
it is.
Talk about that lot. But we've moved on from the damp squib that was Belgium to a lovely, warm and sunny Dutch Grand Prix, and my oh my, what a race weekend we had! I think you couldn't really look anywhere in the stands without seeing a slight hint or a slight hue of orange as the Dutch Barley Army turned Zandvoort orange for Max Verstappen, who led from pole to win the Dutch Grand Prix from Hamilton and Bottas. Perez getting driver of the day, interesting enough, for his defensive driving, but Hodders, the Dutch Grand Prix weekend as a whole, not only did it make us forget what happened the week prior, but what a race weekend we just had in general.
We did, and not just on the track either. I mean, I still recall, I think it was at the time, I think we were all waxing, I was certainly waxing quite lyrical about how eco-friendly and green the weekend was. I think I still recall, I think it was something on the lines of 98% of people went there by public transport, and bearing in mind that Zandvoort's on the seaside and you had trains 10 times an hour, who could blame them? And the whole weekend, including the sport races, was just divine. Those banked turns and everything else. It was just a thoroughly enjoyable weekend, not just on the track, but off the track for the green credentials as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tyson, the circuit itself, obviously, we've had a go on it on the Codemasters game, but it looked a real thrilling challenge. And if you made a mistake, it wasn't these concrete runoff areas; it was gravel, grass, or barrier.
Yep, and mistakes were punished if you made them on that track. But this was the Max Verstappen showcase this weekend. Mercedes, they tried different strategies, but Red Bull just stayed cool. They controlled the race. They counted everything Mercedes threw at them.
Yeah, and absolutely, and it brought them right back into the championship hunt. Moving on to Monza and yet more controversy. We had the second sprint event, which Bottas led from to win, to get some much needed points. However, drama mid race as Hamilton emerged from his pit stop mid-race into the path of Verstappen. They went side by side through the turn 1 into the chicane, but turn 2, Verstappen ran across the curbs into and then on top of Lewis Hamilton to put them both out of the race and trigger the safety car. And we saw the only 1-2 of the season, not for Mercedes, not for Red Bull, but the papaya of McLaren. McLaren back on the top step of the podium for the first time since Brazil 2012, and their first 1-2 since the 2010 Canadian Grand Prix. Ricciardo winning from Lando Norris, Valtteri Bottas, saving Mercedes' skin somewhat with the final podium spots, considering actually he started from the back for seeing his power unit quota. That was always a good performance. Tyson, I know you're slightly inclined towards McLaren.
Slightly
higher.
What a weekend for the McLaren team.
Absolutely, and they just deserved it after everything they've done over the past few years to pull themselves off the back of the grid. Just seeing them right back up there on the front on the podium, amazing to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And oh, how we've missed seeing that shoey celebration. And interesting, later in the season, the McLaren boss, Zach Brown, honouring a bet that he had with Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel getting to drive Dale Earnhardt's car around the Texas circuit, which is something quite special to see. Hodders, from a neutral's point of view, it's always good to see a different team winning, but yeah, this wasn't really one that McLaren lucked into because they were there or thereabouts the whole weekend.
Absolutely, it was absolutely no fluke. They were absolutely outdriving the quote unquote big Formula One teams, the Formula 1.5 teams as well. And they were absolutely there. And one thing that is quite commendable from that race as well was Lando asking, "What do I need to do?" And he was simply told, "Just stay where you are."
Yeah,
and he did.
and actually, I'd actually forgotten
That
about
was
them.
commendable.
Yeah, that was good. That's good drive, a good mature thinking drive there, because obviously, the fallout if Norris had taken the pair of them off, it would have been unthinkable. I think Daniel Ricciardo's smile would have been very quickly turned upside down, but yeah, and McLaren stayed on form heading to Russia for the Sochi event. Lando Norris taking his first pole position. He also set the fastest lap en route. He also got driver of the day, but the win eluded him as rain started to fall with about 8 laps to go. Hamilton was closing. Hamilton chose to pit early for intermediates. Norris pitting way too late and falling all the way down to 7th. Tyson, this was such a heartbreaking thing to see, but I think that just shows why Hamilton and Mercedes are where they are, because they are able to make the correct calls.
Yeah, this was just really unfortunate for Lando, and it was more his inexperience showing at that point. He had track position. He thought he could probably go to the end of the race. The team, well, they kind of told him to come in, but left the decision to him. I think they should have been a little more forceful on that call, but I think it's something he may look back on, remember it, and learn from it.
Yep, and indeed so. So yeah, Hamilton, his 100th race win from Max Verstappen, who came from towards the back, and Sainz also on the podium again in P3. Hold at this point, 100 race wins. Considering we've had, I think it's about 1,050 races by that point. For Hamilton effectively to have the stat that he's won pretty much 10% of all Formula One races, that is staggering.
It really is, when you consider the different drivers we've had during that period as well. It really is incredible.
Such as the longevity, obviously, of his career, and also obviously the seasons are getting more and more longer, so more and more races to win. So moving on to the Turkish Grand Prix, and the wet weather stays with us as we spend the entire race on the intermediate. Ocon actually becoming the first driver in over 20 years to complete a full race distance without having to change tyres. Bottas, a superb result for him, winning first time in over a year for him, winning from Verstappen, and Perez. Driver of the day for Carlos Sainz. Again, this was a race, Hodders, where Hamilton just didn't seem to be there.
Yeah, Hamilton just never got started. He just ended up becoming an also-ran, which was surprising.
Yeah, so it's and again, it's one of those what ifs, but it was this point. It was almost starting to think, you think one, okay, it happens, but 2 or 3, not good. And then on to round 17. The US Grand Prix, and Max Verstappen back on form, leading home from Hamilton and Perez, to the delight of the South American contingent who had crossed the border. Verstappen leading home from pole position and rightfully getting the Driver of the Day award. Tyson, this was another one of those races where the TV director didn't know where to look next in terms of the overtake. It was just happening all over the place.
Yep, Circuit of the Americas, it's one of those tracks that constantly delivers, and this was really the part for me this season where the title fight really heated up on track.
Mm-hmm. And Hodders, a really good battle here. Hamilton reeled Verstappen in those final flaps, but he just could not get into that critical DRS gap to get past Max.
No, he didn't, and that was the thing, and that was great racing from Max in general as well. But it was the sort of racing that we wanted to see: good, clean, pure racing without all the heat of the previous races at the same time.
Indeed not. So, 3/4 of the way through, and the championship standings were thus: Verstappen leading on 287.5 points from Lewis Hamilton on 275.5, a gap of 12 points with just 5 races to go. Valtteri Bottas on 185, that win in Turkey really helping to push him along. Perez with consistent podium finishes up to 4th on 150. Lando Norris P5 on 149. He could have had so much more. Charles Leclerc 6th on 128 points. Carlos Sainz 122.5. Ricciardo 105 with that great haul of points at Monza. Gasly, now the gap starting to appear. Gasly on 74 and Fernando Alonso on 58. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes led the way on 460.5 points from Red Bull on 437.5 points, a gap of 23 points. McLaren and Ferrari still battling hard. McLaren on 254 points, Ferrari on 250.5 points. Alpine on 104, AlphaTauri on 94, Aston Martin now really dropping away from that battle there on 62. Williams with their consistency with their points hauls in the third part on 23 points. Alfa Romeo on 7 points, and the Haas team still on 0. So into the final run then, and the first of the final 5 races at Mexico City, and the same result as before in the US. Verstappen winning from Hamilton, and Sergio Perez, the first Mexican stand on the podium at his home race. Verstappen, terrific win for him, and a great showing from Perez. Unfortunately, the pole sitter Bottas, he found his race and his strategy sacrificed to enable Hamilton to stay with Verstappen. Hodders, the Mexican race always provides a really good carnival atmosphere, and the noise from that baseball stadium section whenever Perez came anywhere near it was just deafening.
Deafening and very much welcome. I mean, why wouldn't you enjoying a Mexican Grand Prix? The carnival atmosphere was definitely there, and it was all good, healthy atmosphere at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tyson, we're starting to see the team orders come into play, which we don't like seeing, but I suppose at this point of the season, kind of understandable.
Yeah, very understandable. At this point of the season, it was very close in the championship, and every point was beginning to count.
Mm-hmm. And then more controversy arose at the final leg of the South American triple header. Hamilton winning from Verstappen and Bottas, but that's only the small part of the story. Hamilton originally set pole position in qualifying, but then was disqualified for an illegal rear wing and was sent to the back of the grid. Clawed his way up to 5th for the start of the race, but also Verstappen caught being a naughty little boy. Hodders having a bit more of an inspection of Hamilton's rear wing than he should have been.
Yes, I think the old adage of "look, don't touch" springs to mind, and unfortunately, that didn't come into play here.
Mm-hmm. Verstappen receiving a $50,000 fine for having a little feel of Hamilton's rear wing in the qualifying Parc Fermé, but Hamilton kept up his terrific performance from the sprint. He did have a penalty for an engine change, so had to drop back to 10th, but managed to carve his way all the way up through the fields to win the Brazil Grand Prix from Verstappen and Bottas. But Tyson, we like to see aggressive defending, but did Max go too far in turn 4?
I think I remember saying at the time, yes, he kind of did go too far with that one, because you do have to keep it on the track, and Max clearly pushed Lewis wide at that point, but it was this point we were beginning to see a little bit of inconsistency.
Yeah, inconsistency in the rules and teams pushing the rules to the absolute limit and sometimes beyond. As we headed out to the final 3 Arabian races for the first time, round 20 was in Qatar, a really lovely flowing circuit, a race won by Hamilton and Verstappen, and Fernando Alonso back on the podium for the first time in 7 years since his days at Ferrari. Alonso quite rightly winning over driver of the day for Tyson. Again, more humble pie for us to eat.
Yep, once again, Alonso just proving that he still had a lot of gas in the tank, still has a lot to offer Formula One.
Mm-hmm. But Hodders, unfortunately, Bottas really undone by a puncture. Otherwise, he probably would have been taking the final spot on the podium.
Yeah, I mean, Bottas didn't have. Bottas had a frustrating season, considering some of it was Paul Ford's, but in this case, it was genuinely out of his hands.
Yeah, but also we saw quite a few tyre failures at the Qatar circuit, which aside from that vicious curb towards the end, it actually looked like a really good, fast-flowing circuit to be racing on. But such is the case, and they'll obviously make changes for next year. Tyson,
or the year after, rather.
We're
not going to Qatar this year.
Yeah, we're not going to Qatar this year. We're going to I still can't remember what year it is anyway. But we could really start to sense now, Hodders, the comments between the team principals in, the pre-event interviews and afterwards. It just was starting to get very personal.
It was getting personal, and I would dare say it was also getting toxic, not just between them, but also that wonderful minefield known as social media as well was getting a bit personal at the same time.
Yeah, and I remember we covered it on the podcast, in that some of the stuff that we were coming across on social media was really quite unpleasant, and we were quite surprised how vitriolic it was getting. So on to the penultimate event, and again Hamilton winning from Verstappen and Bottas. Hamilton also getting the fastest lap point, which meant with 1 race to go, the championship was tied on points for only the second time in Formula One history. But Tyson, a lot of controversy on the restart after a second red flag. Verstappen offered the choice by race control to give the position back to Hamilton after he ran off track.
Yeah, deals being made publicly on the radio, over the airwaves. Again, it was just a really bad look for everyone. And the fact that they couldn't really seem to decide who should be starting in what position, and almost felt like they were making it up as they were going along for the benefit of the show at this point.
But something we've learned obviously since then is that that is the sort of conversations that were regularly happening between Michael Massey, before all this audio is made available to us, and of course his predecessor Charlie Widesing. It was a case of it was quite clear that Verstappen had run off the track, had gained an advantage, and it was a case of Michael Mass saying, "Okay, I'll give you the option. Either you hand the place back, which is normal protocol. It's just obviously because it was a red flag, it was a bit different, or he would prefer it to the stewards because it looked pretty slam dunk that it was going to get a 5-second penalty. So I think he's tried to do it. I think Michael Massey tried to do it the right way, but it's got a bit messy. And then even more controversy erupted towards the end when Verstappen appeared to brake test Lewis Hamilton Hodders. This was when, if it hadn't already boiled over, the championship battle exploded.
Yes, I think it was so explosive that the lid fell off, the lid blew off, and I think it hit whatever first thing it hit in the sky. It was getting very, very unpleasant, and if things hadn't boiled over and exploded, they had there.
Mm-hmm. And it then meant that going into the final race, as we said, the championship standings were tied. Lewis and Max both on 369.5 points each. Max ahead by virtue of the number of wins. Valtteri Bottas on 218 points. Sergio Perez on 190. Leclerc 158. Norris 154. Carlos Sainz in 7th on 149.5 points. Daniel Ricciardo on 115. Gasly a ton up, and Fernando Alonso on 77. And in the Constructors' Championship, it was equally close. Mercedes, 587.5 points. Red Bull, 559.5 points. It did mean Red Bull still had an outside chance to win, but they would need a miracle. Ferrari, clear on 307.5 points. They've guaranteed pretty much the third place in the championship. McLaren on 269, Alpine on 149, AlphaTauri on 120, Aston Martin on 77, Williams on 23 points, Alfa Romeo on 13, and Haas on 0. And so into the final race at Abu Dhabi, and the tension was indeed very, very thick. And in the build-up, Hodders, there was a lot of talk about what happens if Verstappen and Hamilton come together, and to the point where Michael Massey actually had to put in the race director notes just a subtle nudge in the direction of, look, this is what the International Sporting Code says, is any of you try to influence the outcome of the championship.
Exactly, he laid down the law, and quite rightly. I mean, we'll talk about it later. One of the things over the weekend he did right.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's probably just as well that he pointed out, because Verstappen managed to start from pole with Hamilton alongside, but Hamilton beautifully outdragged Verstappen, down to the first corner to lead. However, the drama then unfolded down at turn 5. Verstappen forcing Hamilton wide. Verstappen saying that Hamilton should give the place. But ultimately, the steward, not race control, the steward saying, no, there's nothing wrong with that, play on, because it was deemed Verstappen had forced Hamilton off the track as opposed to Hamilton running wide by himself. And then, of course, it all got quite messy at the end. We've been in details to what happened, but obviously the safety car restart procedure, it looks like it wasn't properly adhered to. But the drama all unfolded on the final lap as Verstappen put in a magnificent pass on Lewis Hamilton to take the lead of the race and to lead the championship to come home and become the 34th different winner of the Drivers' World Championship. Verstappen leading home Hamilton, and Carlos Sainz a pretty superb third. Also, honourable mention there to Yuki Tsunoda, who finished in 4th place. And quite nicely, as a mark of respect from the Formula One fans, driver of the day going to Kimi Räikkönen on his final Formula One appearance. Hollers, obviously, we've talked about it quite a bit in our Abu Dhabi podcast, but it's a shame that what was a superb championship battle and indeed a superb race was marred by controversy from the organisers.
It was a real shame, particularly when you consider that the race itself, and we alluded to this in the Abu Dhabi podcast, the racing itself was fantastic. It was good, solid, enjoyable racing, and absolute credit to both Max and Lewis. They kept it clean. They
did indeed, and Tyson, what was really great to see, good good sporting behaviour from Lewis Hamilton and indeed his father Anthony, shaking hands and congratulating Max and Jos Verstappen and indeed the Red Bull team.
Absolutely, and that was really good to see because Hamilton must have been gutted losing it on the final lap like that, but he remained calm. He was magnanimous in defeat and gave his congratulations like a true champion does.
Mm-hmm. He won the championship on the final lap, if you remember, in 2008 with that famous "Is that Glock" moment. Really, really good stuff to see. What has been really unpleasant though since then, and bear in mind this was about, say, 3-4 weeks ago. It is still going on social media, and it's just such a shame. And just people, if you are still going on, just drop it. It's done. Nothing's going to change. That was the 2021 season across the 22 races. Just have a sort of think back as to what our memories were of the season. What was our best ones? What was our worst ones? Our funniest ones. I don't think we'll go over the controversial ones because we want to obviously try and keep it as light-hearted as possible. Hodders, I'll come to you first. What was your overriding memory of 2021?
I mean, I think my memory of 2021 was, to be honest, it was considering it was the first full season I'd watched in many years, was just how enjoyable everything was. I mean, it was considering that the last time I watched Formula One in full, there wasn't the hybrid era, there wasn't DRS and everything else. Memory for me is the fact that we had a genuinely competitive season, not just for the title, but for positions everywhere across the board. That's one overriding best memory. Obviously, I think another memory, this is not quite F1, was having the W Series support the Formula One Series as well on the level, and having a title decider the same weekend with no other support races at America. That's another overriding memory. Those are the best memories. Worst memory for me, unfortunately, and we've said it before, it has to be Spa. It says something when a race is so farcical that Monaco is more of a race than Spa.
Yeah, I do remember you saying that, and that wasn't good.
That says something, and that's no detriment to Monaco whatsoever. It's not Monaco's fault by any means. It's just it says something.
Yeah, and obviously recently salt was rubbed into the recently dried off wounds of the supporters when they were told they weren't going to be getting their money back, and they would be offered raffle tickets and F1 TV passes.
That's definitely a worst one for me, was the way that fans were treated at Spa. That was one of the lowest points.
Yeah, that wasn't great. Tyson, what about you?
Well, I think obviously the best moment for me is the McLaren 1-2 at Italy.
Yeah, fair.
But outside of that, just the fact it was such a compelling, engaging season. We were expecting another year of Mercedes dominance, and we got a title fight that's going to be remembered and talked about for years to come. Worst, Spa. Just Spa. The less said, the better. And I think the funny moments, well, Lewis Hamilton lining up on the grid all alone is probably not memory.
Am I last?
It really was Formula Lewis.
Oh dear.
Am I last? Yeah, you are.
Oh dear. I think for me, my best memories have got to be seeing Ocon and Ricciardo. Ocon winning. It was just so great to see the celebration with Alpine. Fernando Alonso, just an absolutely stellar performance that weekend. Keeping Hamilton behind him, come what may. For me, one of my worst ones, when we did mention it earlier, is obviously the incident in W Series qualifying at Spa. That was actually that was very concerning to watch. And having watched Formula One for 25 years, seen over 500 races, I can't recall anything similar to that happening in qualifying. We see multiple collisions in races, but in qualifying, I've just never seen that before. I think the fallout from the British Grand Prix was rather unpleasant, which is rather a shame. We didn't want to see that. I think the funniest was probably Lando Stroll. It had to get a
yes, the Lance Lando confusion.
It had to get a mention. It had to get a mention. But that was.
We've avoided it for so long. But
I had to put it in there. For me, and I think, yeah, it's been, like you said, it's been an absolutely thrilling season. I mean, you look back at all the 72 previous seasons in Formula One we've had, the fact that only 2 of them have ever been level on points going into the decider, and it has just gone backwards and forwards. The lead has changed times so many times. It was absolutely brilliant to watch, and I hope that not only does that continue into 2022, but we get the likes of McLaren and Ferrari closing that gap between Mercedes and Red Bull. We may see that with the new car, but we've got to wait until testing has happened before we can do that. And I guess what we should do is have a look and see who had a season to remember and who had a year they would rather forget with our seasonal winners and spinners. For me, my winner, I think it's got to be Lando Norris. 4 podiums, his first ever pole, and so nearly winning in Russia. He's had an absolutely superb season, but the pressure is going to be on him to obviously produce more of those performances next year. For me, my spinner, I think Sergio Perez. I think he had a really inconsistent season at Red Bull. It wasn't down to the fact that Red Bull gave Verstappen the prime strategy. Sergio was just never there or thereabouts, or certainly not on a consistent enough basis. And one could argue he could have cost Red Bulls the Constructors' Championship. Hodders, who are your winners and spinners?
Well, my winner was going to be a driver, but then after much consideration, and it is the first time I've done this podcast, I don't think it was the last time that a winner goes to a team. And my winner for the season is Alpine. Now, originally, I was going to give it just to Alonso, who, as we've said already through this podcast, has absolutely proven us completely wrong. And I will say, Fernando, we apologise for... we are very sorry for doubting you, because what a season he had. To enter his 40th year and have a season like that is fantastic. On top of that, his supportive role with and alongside Esteban Ocon, who's had his best full Formula One season since his first full season in 2017 when he finished 8th. And both of them are showing that Alpine and predecessor Renault have got a lot of potential for 2022. Spinner, I had to think long and hard, and it pained me to do it, but my spinner for the season, after much thought, was Antonio Giovinazzi. I feel like he had a great surge in the last part of the season, but I think the writing was already on the wall by that point, with Guan Yu Zhou being pretty much primed for a seat of some description. And I think it was rumoured for months beforehand. But on the upshot, though, he is in Formula E later this month.
Mm-hmm. And we will indeed keep an eye on that. And Antonio has himself said that he's not completely finished with Formula One, so it may well be that he is back in Formula One, either in a test or a reserve, or we may even see him back in 2023. Finally, Tyson, over to you.
Right, well, I am just going to be super basic with my picks. The obvious winners, it's Lewis and Max. Both of them, they put on a hell of a show all year long. It was exciting, it was dramatic. We've been over it. It was controversial, but it was never boring between the two of them. They pushed each other. They brought out the very best that the other one had to offer. So, Lewis, he had the performance in Brazil, just a career highlight for sure. Right up there with Senna in Brazil in 1991 and Jenson Button in Canada in 2011. Max Verstappen, he did the whole season and just did not change who he was the whole time. Just an exciting, uncompromising driver who is the real breath of fresh air that the sport needs. And it looks like he's going to be leading the charge for the new generation as we're hitting that crossover point now for the new era. And for spinner, well, it had to be the man who finished last in the championship, Nikita Mazepin. Feels a bit unfair, given that this was really a learning season for him, and he didn't have much to work with in terms of the car, but he was outclassed by his teammate Mick Schumacher, who also has the same equipment next season. Mazepin just needs to really pick things up.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, Lewis and Max absolutely pushed each other hard. We got the very best out of them. We sometimes also got the very worst out of their respective teams. Mazepin, I mean, you could have made the case for the Haas team, but when you see the qualifying gaps between Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin, you'd say that Nikita Mazepin, deserving his spinner status. But we will wait and see what the new season brings us. It may well be that Haas, now that because they put all their eggs into their 2022 basket, we may see Haas move up the field. Honourable winners for us, I think we have to give one to probably a favourite here at Double Wave Yellows is Yuki Tsunoda. He had a really, really good first season, just got his head down, got on with it, managed to set the bleep machine off on a few occasions, but that's fine by us, that's passion. But Hodders, fair to say, the pressure will be on him in 2022. You allowed a relatively easy first season, but second season onwards, you have to perform. You have to keep your seat.
I think it's safe to say that his first season was a probationary season. The second one will be even the sort of the tail end of probation where he makes the grade or doesn't. He's a good driver and he's shown that potential. And he definitely showed it towards the latter part of the season. But he just needs that consistency so he can hold on to that AlphaTauri seat. He's capable, but he's going to have to work hard.
Mm-hmm. And I don't want to call it a spinner as such, but I think something that is worth a mention is just the organisers over, not the stewards, not the race directors. Just we saw a lot of things a lot of occasions this year when the rules in terms of either how they're written, how they're applied, interpreted, and of course the mess at Spa, it meant that a lot of the times F1 fans were talking about what they were doing rather than what the drivers and the teams were doing, and that needs to change. We need to the sport needs to ensure that they learn from what happened. We've obviously talked ad infinitum about Spa and about Abu Dhabi, but they're having other things this year. How many times have we seen these great big massive queues in qualifying one where drivers have nearly ploughed into a slow line of traffic? That's got to stop because that is just dangerous. It'll be interesting to see what change, if any, happens to the sprint events, because I think there's a good idea there, but I think there are a few faults there. Hodders, anything else that you can think of in regards to that as well?
I haven't got anything to add at that point.
Tyson?
No, I think you've covered everything now.
Yeah, okay. So, we don't want to... It's like in any sport, we don't want to be talking about what the officials are doing. We want to be talking about what, the players, the drive, what the actual athletes are doing, not what's happening off the field, so to speak. And so on to our final thoughts. And Hodders, I've already said it. Max Verstappen, a very worthy world champion.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, it was controversial circumstance in Abu Dhabi, and that can be spoken about until the cows come home. And I've already extended the analogy beyond death. I think more times than I need than comfortable. But he won it fair and square. Simple as that.
Yep.
Overall.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyson, do we think that Hamilton can regain his crown?
I absolutely think Lewis can, because 2016, we saw what happened after Rosberg won the championship and then retired. 2017, Hamilton came back and he threw everything into his racecraft at that point. Ferrari, Sebastian Vettel had no answer for him. And I'm hoping that's what we're going to see next season.
Mm-hmm. But Hollers, would it be fair to say that he needs to... when he's made mistakes this year, they have been catastrophic ones. We look at Baku, we look at Monaco, we look at Budapest. On two occasions there were wins that he could have and should have had, and that obviously would have changed the result. So he needs to iron the mistakes out.
He's absolutely got to get rid of these basic errors. Otherwise, that I feel like he may not have the chance to do a late rally like he did this year.
Thinking briefly ahead to 2022, Tyson, McLaren, Ferrari, are we going to see them battling for wins, or in McLaren's case, more wins?
I certainly hope so. We've got the new cars coming in, we've got the new regulations. It's all up in the air. Anything can happen. And considering the consistency that Ferrari have had all season and some of the flashes of greatness we've seen from McLaren, I really want to see both teams up there competing for race wins.
And Hodders, it could well be also that not just McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes are battling for. We could have the likes of Aston Martin in there if things go their way, Alpine as well, and obviously, it would be great to see all 10 teams next year competing definitely for the points and possibly for podiums.
It's very much a never say never. I mean, I feel like the last few seasons before I started watching again, there did seem to be some real disparities. And I feel like, as I've said before, the 2022 regulations and changes will certainly not make it a completely level playing field, a la the W Series, F2, F3, Formula E, etc., the other formulas. But it'll certainly make it... I think it'll make it more of a gentle incline, more gentle hills than mountains, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah, so hopefully just much closer racing. The cars will, from what we understand of the design of the chassis, that it's designed to have much closer racing. So yeah, it will undoubtedly close the gap between the front to the grid to the back. But yeah, we will wait and see. Okay, so coming up soon, next month we will do the 2022 season preview, where we will have a look at the runners and riders, we'll have a look at the regulations, and we'll cast our eye on our predictions for the upcoming season. And then Monday, 21st of March, we're going to do it from Mondays from now on. It will be the 2022 Bahrain Grand Prix review as we review all the action from the opening round in Sakir. Right, well, as always, Hodders, Tyson, thank you very much for your company for this podcast and indeed this season. Have you enjoyed it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It has been an absolute joy. And one other honourable mention I didn't mention before is another honourable mention, I think, is all of those of us who've been watching the F1s together as a community. That's been really wonderful to have.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always good fun to chat together whilst we're all watching the Grand Prix simultaneously, and just some of the stuff that we come out with is definitely not repeatable on here, but less about that the better. As always, don't forget to like our podcast, comment down below. We want to know what you hear. Subscribe to our podcast as well. Please give us a follow on Twitter, D-Waved Yellows. We've come across so many different people on there. We hope you like our podcast. Let us know. Is there anything that you think we should be talking about? Is there anything you want us to feature on our VSC podcast? Are you even brave enough to come and have a guest appearance on our podcast? Don't know. We've got to see how that works out. And lastly, from myself, Matt, as always, be good, be safe, and be kind. From all of us here, thank you so much for watching this podcast and indeed this year. We will speak to you all in February. Take care. Bye-bye.